And we're live. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. My name is Gabriela Neusner, and I'm an ORISE Fellow with the EPA Trash-Free Waters Program. And thanks for joining this webinar about reuse models as part of the solution to the plastic pollution crisis. We're really lucky to have three incredible speakers today. Annika Grieve from Loop, Miriam Gordon from Upstream Solutions, and Crystal Dreisbach from Don't Waste Durham and Durham Green to Go. I just wanted to start off by saying that this is a conversation about reuse models and their potential to help us reduce our reliance on single-use plastics. And we've asked Annika from Loop and Crystal from Green to Go to discuss their two examples of reuse platforms for informational purposes only. As you know, EPA does not endorse any individual product or enterprise. And for future events and publications on this topic, we'll certainly consider including other vendors and organizations. So with that, I want to turn it over to Adam Saslow, a senior facilitator from Kearns and West, who will be moderating the webinar for us. So yeah, let's get started. And Adam, you're on mute still.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you, Gabby. And hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for today's webinar on reuse models as part of the solution to the plastic pollution crisis. As Gabby said, my name is Adam Saslow, and I'm the host for today's session. I'm a senior facilitator with Kearns and West and a builder of collaborative solutions for over 22 years. I've been consulting to US EPA's Trash-Free Waters program since its inception now over 8 years ago. I'm joined today by Kearns and West Casey Hoffman and Ivana Rosas, both behind the scenes working to ensure that today's technology runs smoothly for all. We're going to approach the next 90 minutes or so in 3 segments. In the first segment, we're going to stage a series of 5 to 10 minute presentations. Our speakers will offer insights on what they've learned as they've attempted to change the paradigm of single-use packaging and plastics. Each short presentation will be followed by a little probing from within the group. In the second segment, we'll engage each other in some casual conversation. It's an opportunity for our 3 panelists to chat amongst themselves as they've approached these issues from different angles. And I'm sure they'll have some mutual curiosity. For those of you returning to the webinar series, the cadence will seem both light and familiar. In the third segment, we'll reach into the chat room and we'll pull out a few questions from you, the viewing audience. The Kearns and West team will be monitoring the chat box throughout the next 90 minutes and working to extract themes that we're seeing emerge there. I'll convey a few of those more common questions to our panelists as we round out the 90 minutes together. Overall, we'll try to strike a chord between presentation and conversation, a little late night TV component to an informative discussion. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. First, your microphones have been set to mute. We're trying to keep the background noise to a minimum. This session will be semi-interactive using the chat box, as I mentioned, in the right-hand corner of the webinar window. You can either share comments with the speakers or those who are watching, or you can note questions for the speakers. Like I said, our team will cluster similar questions and try to convey them to our panelists, Casey and Ivana. We'll be monitoring that chat box and triaging everything that comes in. They'll be sending me your questions as we make our way through the next 90 minutes. When our speakers have finished their prepared remarks and a little bit of banter, I'll ask as many of those questions as time allows, recognizing that we don't want to hold you at all beyond the 90 minutes we've reserved of your time. Should there be unanswered questions after that time, we urge you to reach out directly to our speakers, the Trash-Free Water staff, or even the Kearns and West team. Everyone's contact information will be posted on the last slide, and you're more than welcome to reach out to them directly. At the end, there'll be a post-survey pop-up box that we'll use to help gauge your reactions and to inform future activities. We hope that you find the next 90 minutes to be both informative and entertaining, and we thank you for joining us today. All right, let's get after it. Let's take a minute to introduce our 3 guests. First, Crystal Dreisbach. Crystal is a solutionary whose life goal is to disrupt the status quo of our take and trash economy. She's the founder and executive director of a nonprofit in Durham, North Carolina called Don't Waste Durham, where she invented and operates Green to Go, a citywide reuse system. Crystal's an avid hiker and the mother of 2 young boys. Annika Grieve heads up the North American business development team for Loop, TerraCycle's circular reuse platform that launched in 2019. TerraCycle is known for eliminating the idea of waste, and Loop enables consumers to purchase products in reusable packaging. She joined TerraCycle earlier in the year and leads the brand and retail strategy for the North American market, focusing on new partnerships. And last, but certainly not least, Miriam Gordon is Upstream's policy director and an architect of innovative policies and award-winning programs that prevent pollution and save business money. Protecting the planet and its inhabitants has been a lifelong passion that has taken Miriam on a 30-year journey through 2 state capitals as a waste and toxics lobbyist, through 5 government agents, including EPA Region 2, and fighting the good fight with 3 public interest groups that work to protect the planet and its inhabitants. Miriam imagines that her gravestone may read that she pestered everyone who would listen about the need to prioritize source reduction. All right, that's about all I've got here. Crystal, start us off, present to us Don't Waste Durham and Green to Go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Crystal Dreisbach, the Executive Director of Don't Waste Durham in Durham, North Carolina. And I'm going to talk about the city-level reuse model that my organization has been pilot testing since 2017 and is now scaling to other U.S. cities. Next slide. Yep, next slide, please. My organization is a nonprofit, and we create solutions that prevent trash at its source. Next slide. We work on both reuse innovations as well as policies around source reduction, because policy and innovation, we believe, go very much hand in hand. Laws can incentivize people in industry to choose the right behaviors or de-incentivize the less desirable behaviors, while innovations give people in industry alternatives they can use now. Next slide. As an example, our Bull City Boomerang Bag Program means clean, reusable bags made of local materials circulate throughout Durham from kiosks at stores and are free and accessible. And this program helps offset equity concerns related to pushing the 10-cent bag fee through City Council. Next slide. Durham's landfill closed in the mid-90s, and since trucks its trash daily on a 200-mile round trip to a landfill in a poor marginalized county. And meanwhile, trash in the streets, of course, creates stormwater management problems and pollution, and these issues are not unique to Durham. Compostable food packaging always sounds ideal, but it's very costly in comparison, and the overwhelming majority contain PFAS and end up in a landfill anyway, where they produce methane gas. Recycling facilities' most costly pain point right now is receiving the wrong materials and not enough of the right materials to be financially viable. They're passing these costs on to the cities, and we see municipalities enacting bans on single-use items. Next slide. What's needed now is to address these barriers with circular reuse models. Don't Waste Durham has innovated changes in supply chain, infrastructure, and technology for reuse. For us, it really comes down to changing the supply chain from one that is about taking and trashing, a one-way model, to one that supports an infrastructure for reuse. Next slide. We started in 2017 by piloting our Green to Go service. It makes reusables an option for consumers and businesses where it hasn't been before. We've now added reusable pizza boxes, stainless steel reuse cups, stainless steel sauce cups with lids, and a catering model called Green to Go Dinner Club. This year, we're adding coffee cups and bowls. 250 cities around the country have contacted us to ask us to help them pilot their own reusable container systems. So we provide cities with our best practices, all of our tools, an affordable app license, and problem-solving phone calls. We're also co-founders of the Reuse Systems Alliance, made up of 35 reuse companies around the world. And we have a formal agreement between us to share knowledge in petition, to help one another, to speak as a single voice, and to move the reuse movement forward together. Next slide. So here's how our very simple green to go reuse model works. Customers use their app to order their food green to go. The food locations are already stocked with clean, sanitized containers. Package the durable, reusable instead of a disposable. The customer checks out their container, much like a library book, and takes their food home, enjoys it, and when they're ready, they can return it to any return station in town. This is part of the infrastructure we've built, 30 return stations across the city, which are locatable on the app for the convenience of the customers. And here's Karen on bicycle, picking up the containers servicing the return stations, transporting them to a central wash facility where the containers are washed, sanitized, dried, and then transported back to restock the locations. Next slide. We've upgraded our wash facility to a large wash facility so we can switch businesses off single use on an even larger scale. Our restaurant model to other industries. Next slide. In 2019, we began a series of tests to see whether the recycling industry could be the existing infrastructure we need to support a very large-scale societal shift to reusables. After we switch the entire city to reusables, we're going to need a much larger infrastructure than Karen on a bicycle. So we're building the proof of concept that recovering materials using the recycling infrastructure, the trucks, the routes, the conveyor belts, the facilities, and then redistributing them back to the manufacturers and retailers can be worth it to all parties. We presented the results of our first 2 award-winning pilot tests at the EPA Recycling Innovation Expo and many other conferences, and we'll be starting pilot number 3 this year. Next slide. The city is, as an entry point for circular reuse models, is really ideal for several reasons. And this is Ellen MacArthur Foundation research that indicates the largest source of single-use pollution is cities, and that by 2050, 75% of our population will reside in cities and create 50% of our trash. So what is the government's responsibility? The government has for decades, unwittingly or not, subsidized the pollutive 10-cent type of containers by providing things like municipal trash pickup that does not incentivize waste reduction. And usually the government also does not regulate what types of packaging can be used. Regulation is part of the solution, but reuse as a municipal utility provided by government, just like trash and recycling, is where we see reuse models headed. And we hope to inspire and proliferate our citywide reuse models everywhere. And last slide. Thank you.
I hate fumbling for the mute. Okay, so I've got 1,000 questions. I'm sure everybody out there does too. I'm going to ask one, if you don't mind, and then we'll move on to maybe another question, but then get on to Annika's presentation. So, burning question. When you got started back in 2017, what were the biggest challenges you faced when you were launching Green to Go and trying to get restaurants and their customers on board? How did you overcome them? Are they the same challenges you're facing now, 4 years later? And where's this going? Sorry, that was a lot. This is really exciting stuff. What do you got?
Yeah, thank you. This is a fun one. One of the first challenges back in 2016 was designing the program. Because when you're launching a reuse system, you're not only starting a new business, but we really had to design almost entirely a new system by something that simply didn't exist yet. So to overcome that, we advertised a series of work sessions in our local co-op market for the public to come and get divided into small groups with Sharpies and large paper and get assigned to think about each element of the program design. So it was a business we truly designed that was designed by the people for the people. And everyone came, from chefs to Uber drivers, elected officials, and little old ladies. And they really contributed to the design. And one of the probably the biggest factors during that time was that we involved the Durham County Health Department in their leadership from the very earliest conception of the program. And they actually helped us design our return stations and our wash protocols. And they're very proud of the partnership with us because they help us exceed state health code. And plus, you just really never want to blindside your health department. Right now, one of the challenges is, we have tested this for now 4 years in Durham, and other cities want to replicate this. And so we're documenting our best practices and sharing all the tools we've built and helping on the phone every week. And then locally, we also want to expand at the same time. So there are some special needs, of course, during COVID. We've helped to pilot a successful model of meal delivery in neighborhoods that can actually more easily scale to cities around us. We've built an easy app that helps restaurants keep all their money, no fees to places like Uber Eats and Grubhub, no fees leaving the community. So restaurants who are struggling keep all their money during COVID, and it also gets takeout to very large groups of people in trash-free packaging. So there's so much demand in all of the various industries. One of our challenges is really focusing on what are the biggest waste producers that we can hone in on and start to eliminate this from a source standpoint.
I think I'm supposed to ask the next question, right?
If you've got one, Miriam, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So, Crystal, I love Don't Waste Durham. I love you. You're amazing. I'm just wondering if you can give us a sense of how much businesses are saving by implementing your program and these types of programs.
What's really interesting about a reuse model is that, of course, the upfront cost of a reusable container is much higher, right? But what happens when you insert a reusable, well-designed, durable container into a system that allows it to be recovered and used again and again? What happens is the cost per usage becomes very low, especially if you can do your life cycle analysis and ensure that your container is one that can be kept in use for the maximum amount of in the form in which it was manufactured. So what's great is right now, green to go businesses are not having to pay for disposables, so they're saving there. But interestingly, the market research that surprised us is that among all the reasons for joining Green to Go, saving money was the least important aspects to the food business. The biggest reasons instead for joining is that it's a competitive market. The restaurants want to be distinct from other restaurants. And meanwhile, Green to Go is a loyalty program. So the second reason is we are helping them make more money by getting them return customers. And outside of Green to Go takeout, the wash services that we're providing are now corporate cafes and schools and grocery stores. And an analysis of a school's savings has shown that even when they pay a monthly recurring fee to restock them, they're still saving $1,200 a year.
All right, fantastic. Let's turn now to Annika Grave. Tell us about Loop.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. As Madam mentioned, my name is Annika. I head up the business development team for Loop in North America. Loop is a TerraCycle company, and TerraCycle is a social enterprise, which means really we're a mission-based company with the mission to eliminate waste. We're headquartered in Trenton, New Jersey, are active in 22 countries globally, and have been around for about 20 years now. And really how we've been approaching this mission traditionally over the past 20 years or so is by helping to recycle the traditionally non-recyclable. So what that means is we help brand partners, retailers, community organizations, municipalities to collect and find a recycling alternative for things that don't go in your municipal blue box. So anything like flexible chip packaging, to more complex waste streams such as cigarette butts, razor blades, or even dirty diapers in some cases. What we've noticed, though, is primarily being this recycling company, is that although recycling is very critical and necessary, it is much more of a band-aid on a much larger issue. We cannot recycle our way out of the waste issue that we're in today. Which brings us to what Loop is. And Loop is ultimately our next answer to this approach by looking to design out of waste at its source, similar to what you heard from Crystal earlier as well, by really being able to design into something that's durable and reusable rather than a single-use type of alternative. Go to the next slide, please. So ultimately what we're doing with Loop is trying to build this global platform for reuse, where we're trying to mimic a lot of the aspects of disposability, which have become so important to today's consumer, of making it convenient and affordable, and having this kind of buy anywhere, return anywhere type feel. But instead of a recycling effort or a landfill at the back end, it does become cleaned and then reused again and again. If you go to the next slide. Loop as a concept came around in about 2017. We announced to the world in 2019 at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. A few months later, in May of 2019, we launched in our first 2 markets, being the Northeastern US and also in Paris, France. Since that time, we've now launched we're live in 4 markets. So we've launched in Canada as recently as last month, so Feb 1, and also are live in the UK now as well. By the end of this year, we're also going live into Japan and also Australia. We are partnered with over 200 brand partners, have over 500 products on the system today, and partnered with over 15 retail partners nationally across both retail side, but also with expanding into some quick service restaurant and other industries as well. If you move to the next slide. Ultimately, what we're doing with Loop is following a very similar global footprint to our TerraCycle parent company within this space. And what we're trying to do is we help brand partners and manufacturers be able to move from a single-use type of packaging to a reusable, durable type of packaging. And then we work with retail partners to be able to embed that reuse system into their existing infrastructure. We move to the next slide. How we've come about this is really borrowing some wisdom from the past. Everybody knows of the milkman. It's not so prevalent anymore, but the image is still very much very aware for most people. And the interesting thing here is that in this model, the package, or the bottle in this case, was really an asset to the brand and manufacturer, which means that the more times that milk manufacturer used that bottle, the cheaper it was per him per fill, similar to what Crystal was saying earlier. So it was really because of economics, not because of sustainability, that this model existed. And then if we move to the next slide, the 50s and 60s happened. And there's an interesting shift that happened within this space. This is one of my favorite images. It is actually the cover, or it was in Times Magazine in 1955, and now it looks like it should be on the National Geographic. So it's very out of place in today's age. But what this is showing this emergence of disposability, and it's really a celebration. And we need to take a moment and actually appreciate that, because this is the first time where we've seen materials start to decrease in costs, efficiencies come into play, and suddenly you have this change of ownership in packaging. Where though the message here is, why spend 30 minutes doing your dishes after dinner when you can throw them away and spend that time with your family? So there's this emergence of convenience and affordability that we haven't seen previously before then. The interesting shift though that happens is that ownership of packaging has actually shifted now. So rather than being an asset for the brand and manufacturer, it's now a cost of goods sold. So when you buy your coffee, you buy the cup that goes along with it. When you buy your shampoo, you buy the bottle that goes along with it. So it's the first time that you as a consumer are actually buying something that you really have no intent of using for more than maybe the 5 minutes to consume that coffee. If we go to the next slide. This shift to being a cost of goods sold for manufacturers and for a variety of reasons has led to a trend of lightweighting in the last couple of decades. As you have a cost of goods sold, what you do as a manufacturer is you try to reduce those costs however you can. This trend of lightweighting, along with a multitude of other factors that have come into play here, has ultimately had a couple of unintended consequences within the space. One of which is the recycling rates that continue to decrease within the space because there's just no economic value in the recycling of any of these materials on the right-hand side of this graph, and that becomes less and less the lighter weight material it is. The other side of it, though, taking the recyclability aside, is really the consumer interaction and perception with that container itself. Most people attending today, I presume the majority would prefer to have their favorite beverage out of a glass rather than a pouch or carton alternative within that space. And this is something that we've heard time and time again. So there is a consumer perception here that is at play as well. So what we're trying to do at Loop really, and if we go to the next slide, is trying to merge the best of both of these worlds. So we're trying to uphold those virtues which are so important to us now in the world of disposability, being the convenience and the affordability side of it, while minimizing the negative impact on the environment. If you go to the next slide. How we're doing this is now by fundamentally shifting that packaging, that ownership of the packaging back to the brand and manufacturer. So in this model, a brand owns the packaging, it becomes their asset, and they start to amortize it over uses. As Crystal mentioned, it does cost more to design into something that is reusable, but it allows you to unlock a number of interesting features. Not only the design, which in this case, the Haagen-Dazs example is a beautiful container, but also new features that go along with it. So that varies across the scale and really depending on the breadth within that space. But this as an example is actually a double-walled stainless steel container, which means that when you take it out of the freezer, your hands don't freeze, it gets to room temperature pretty quickly, but it actually melts the inside top down. So you don't get the iceberg effect that you would get when you're eating ice cream out of a carton alternative, which I am also guilty of. Ice cream tastes better out of the pint. So they've actually optimized the eating experience for the consumer in this space. If we just do a slow flip through, I'm going to show a couple of images to show what some of those examples are of what's currently live within the US today. And really on this space right now, what we're seeing in 2021 is an interesting shift. We continue to flip through. We have branded partners that really go across all different industries in this space, a lot of which are in the fast-moving consumer goods in the CPG space, and also sold through mass retailers such as Kroger and Walgreens, but also most recently Ulta, which is one of our announcements. And then we move into the world of the quick service restaurant industry as well, with partners such as Burger King or McDonald's in some cases, and also Tim Hortons on the Canadian side if there's any international visitors here. What this looks like in the store situation is what I wanted to pull up here as well, is that you have this basically a nice, beautiful end cap type of opportunity for our brand partners, but allowing consumers, you as a consumer, to be able to buy your reusable containers in the same area that you buy currently your single-use alternatives. So going to the same grocery store, you keep your same habits. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is build this convenience factor around the model. So for the consumer end, your journey is basically as it is today, and you don't need to change many habits within that space. So having a buy anywhere, return anywhere type feel to basically mimic disposability, but with none of the negative consequences aside from it. That's me.
Awesome. You guys are doing some amazing things. As I understand it, Loop is currently operating in, let me remember, Canada, France, Great Britain, and obviously here. And I think you're planning on launching your services in Japan and a few other countries. How do you decide where you're going to go? And is it easier to develop your services and stuff abroad relative to the US, or is it easier? I mean, what's the policy landscape like, consumer behavior, all of that?
Yeah, that's a lot of questions packed into one.
I know, I keep doing that, I'm sorry.
I'll answer at high level and then happy when we get into the discussion to go into a lot more detail on each of those aspects. So yes, we are live in 4 markets, being Canada, US, the UK, and France. And we are launching actually in Japan later on this month and Australia later on this year. So we'll be live in 6 markets by the end of 2021. We are, how we decide on a new market is really a multitude of different items. A big part of it is using existing infrastructure that's already in place there, both in our TerraCycle side of the business, but also where our partners would like to go. The interest from industry, including retail partners and brand partners in this case, of where they'd like to see this happen. Consumers is a big part of this. 100%, understanding what consumers are saying and what they're demanding and asking for. And policy is a big actor in this space as well. So it really comes in not just from one area, it is a multitude, and it is a very multifaceted approach of how we choose and where we've gone. US compared to, another market within that space, surprisingly, no, it's not more difficult, and I would say it's on par necessarily, within the European space and the North American side of it. Yes, there are different policies in play, but the consumers are asking for the same thing, which is having more sustainable options. So it's interesting, and I think we're going to see a really interesting shift within the next couple of years.
Annika, I have a question for you. First of all, I'm so impressed with Loop, especially the scope and the scale to which you're growing. It's just wonderful to see. It makes me really happy, especially about household products. So being a reuse system ourselves, I'm so interested in washing and the sort of nitty-gritty of how it works. So much about reuse is about washing dishes. So I'm interested to know more about the washing of Loop's returned packaging. Where are your containers washed? How are they washed? How do you see that as part of the future of packaging?
Yeah, the washing part is a big component of the course. So we work with a global strategic partner of ours, Ecolab, to do washing and cleaning of our containers. We build those cleaning processes specifically for our brand partners. So just as a brand and manufacturer sets the requirements for new packaging and having be that, you know, food grade acceptable within their space to fill their product in to make sure it's safe and meets all the regulations, we work with them to make sure that the cleaning process is specific to their products and makes it safe within that area as well. So it's definitely a huge component of the space, absolutely.
All righty. Next up is Miriam. Talk to us.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. So let's see. Can you put my first slide up, please? Great, thank you. So Upstream works to change our single-use culture through culture-changing communications by accelerating business innovation and also by accelerating through policy innovation. And next slide, please. And our focus is on solving the plastic pollution problem by working on upstream solutions. And that means working to prevent waste before it starts. And that is more effective for businesses. It saves businesses money. It's more effective for our communities. It protects their health. And it's also better for the planet. Next slide, please. Essentially, reuse reduces the use of natural resources, and it also reduces pollution, which means that it treats our people and the planet as indisposable. Next slide. Reuse is a win on many fronts. For the environment, it is a win as long as the reusable product is used an adequate number of times. And it is a win on every environmental measure, whether it's climate or water pollution or toxics. And for businesses, it is a win. Ellen MacArthur Foundation has said that it represents as much as a $10 billion opportunity for businesses to save money. And our communities who are spending so much money on cleaning up waste, on managing waste and cleaning up litter, can save enormous amounts of money and also bring in jobs. Estimates are as much as 10 to 30 times more jobs available in reuse and repair than in recycling and landfilling. Next slide. And so in terms of creating indisposable communities, our policy focus is on getting people what they want without all the waste. And that means reducing the unnecessary stuff like single-use accessories that you don't need with your takeout order, and unpackaging products. It also means transitioning to reusable and refillable models like the lovely community-based one that Don't Waste Durham represents and the big brand landscape that ReLoop represents. And then after we do the reduce and reuse as much as possible, then we need to recycle and compost the rest. Next slide. So I want to take you on a quick tour of an indisposable community. So imagine that we are sitting down to dine on site at a restaurant, even a McDonald's, and they serve you on reusable cups, plates, and utensils. Or we decide to go and get a coffee to go, and we have available at the cafe a returnable, reusable cup. Or we decide to get a takeout meal, and the restaurant is providing, again, a returnable, reusable package like in Durham. Or you want to restock your house cleaning product, or your personal care, your shampoo, personal care product, or your food in your pantry. And you can go to a store and go visit a Reloop kiosk, or there's a tricycle with refill options roaming around your community, and you just bring your reusable container and refill. Or you go to your favorite sports stadium or festival, and everyone is drinking out of reusable, returnable cups. Next slide. And in this indisposable community, single use is ancient history. History got left off there. Next slide. Well, this is happening today, actually, with policies that are being iterated at the local level. So to date, 4 cities have enacted policies that say no to single use for on-site dining, where you get real cups, plates, and utensils. 9 cities have enacted policies that charge for single-use takeout cups, which makes the reusable cup more attractive. About 30 cities have said accessories with takeout and delivery have to be available only upon request. And one brave little city, Arcata, California, has attached a charge to single-use takeout food containers. Next slide. Now, all told, the population of the cities that have enacted these kinds of reusable foodware ordinances is over 2 million, and that's just since the end of 2019. And had COVID not put a delay on things, we would have had policies like these in New York and San Francisco, and that would have pushed us over 11 million people just in about a year and a half. Next slide. And I do believe that we are on the cusp this year of enacting policies like these, not just in New York and in San Francisco, but all over the country and all over the world. And just to give you a sense of how local policies can have such a broad impact and build the reuse movement, currently 2/3 of the population, 5 billion people, live in a place where single-use plastic bags are either banned or there's a fee attached to them, which is driving reuse. And that policy model started at the local level here in my hometown of San Francisco, and also in Ireland, and grew very quickly in the space of about 10 years. Next slide. So policies create a tremendous opportunity for change. And there are all kinds of other policies that are being iterated as we speak, not just in the food service space. There are policies that are applying to other kinds of single-use bags, produce bags and dry cleaning bags, ones that reduce single-use hotel toiletries, that give us the right to repair products rather than have to chuck them out when they stop working, that are bringing refillable beverage bottles back into our bottle deposit programs, and bringing and encouraging the kinds of models that we see with Loop of refillable cleaning and personal care and grocery products. Next slide. So Upstream is working to grow this reuse movement through policy, by leading local reuse coalitions throughout the San Francisco Bay Area and seeding reuse coalitions, meaning we get other NGOs to start them up, and we help them, we support their growth. So we have coalitions in Los Angeles, reusable coalitions in LA, New York, New England, just starting, and more. And we feed this movement, this policy movement, through national reuse forums and by providing resources, information, and networking opportunities and launching policy campaigns. Last slide, please. And we invite you to join this movement. If you're an NGO, you can join the National Reuse Network. And also if you're a reuse business, this network is for you if you're interested in helping accelerate change through policy measures. And also for government entities, we have a national forum with leaders in government who are helping to innovate policies and build the community infrastructure that supports programs like Green to Go and Reloop. That's
Wow.
all for me.
Okay, so neither Jimmy Kimmel or, for our older demographic, Johnny Carson, would ask compound questions in the way that I have asked Annika and Crystal. So I'm going to do better this time.
Oh yeah, good.
One question: what kind of federal, state, or municipal policies would help support a transition from single-use plastics to reuse and refill models?
I gave you a sense of some of the local level policies, but I'm very excited to say that with the change of administration, it is finally becoming possible to think at the federal level. And we do have the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act that was introduced last year and is being reintroduced now. And we also have climate legislation. So we have plastics legislation, climate legislation, and in those arenas, both at the federal and the state level, what we're advocating for is creating targets for different business sectors for how much reusable and how much of the packaging has to be reusable and refillable through what we call a rates and dates kind of approach. So X amount by a certain date has to be reusable and refillable. I just gave you kind of the landscape of the different business sectors that this should be happening. It should be happening in the beverage industry. So the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act has proposed a national bottle deposit return system program. And there, in those state and local laws, we should be having refillables play a role. Also climate legislation where there are targets for consumption reduction. Some of that consumption reduction should be achieved with targets for reuse and refill of our packaging. Extended producer responsibility is a very hot topic this year for packaging. Many states have introduced this legislation, and also that is a piece of the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. Again, that is a place where refill, reuse, and source reduction should be playing a role. Again, requiring that a percentage of the packaging that's put on the market is reusable, refillable. But it's very important that that in producer responsibility laws, that the fees that producers have to pay for their waste products do not attach to refillables. Those should not have a cost associated with them. And then there are all these policies at the local level that I went over. So those are just some of the ways that some of the areas where we are actually negotiating right now in state and federal legislation.
That's awesome to hear. Miriam, I'd love to understand from you, obviously COVID has been since 2020 a very top of mind topic for everyone. Has that impacted the types of policies that you're actually working on?
So COVID has really, as I said, slowed down our policy progress because a lot of those groundbreaking, innovative local policies that apply to the food service industry are rightly being put on hold because food service industry doesn't have on-site dining in many places and has been slammed. So a lot of local legislation has been put on hold. At the same time, the plastics industry has been promoting a narrative that plastics make us safer during COVID, which is not true and not borne out by the science and not accepted by the FDA. And the CDC has recently also put out a statement that says that single use and plastics aren't making us safer because the virus isn't being transferred from contact with surfaces. It's being transferred by aerosolized droplets. So touching a reusable container or utensil isn't the way that you're going to get coronavirus. So we have to push. Our movement has been pushing back against this narrative. For the last year, this narrative has influenced the guidance that health departments at the local and state level have given, and even the federal level have given out to restaurants about food service operations. But slowly we are seeing change. So it's also put plastic bag bans on hold or reverse them. So we see a real mixed bag, if you will, of impacts from this narrative, from the plastics industry and from COVID. So in some places, the guidance is being reversed and the backlash against disposables is changing, and in some places it's not. So I want to just invite everybody to join whatever effort. We're launching an effort next week to get consumers to sign on to a statement that says we want businesses to reopen with reuse because it's safer for our health and it's also better for the planet. I mean, not safer for our health because reuse is fine and no threat to our health, and also better for the planet.
Great. Okay. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. First, public service announcement. I should have mentioned earlier that this webinar is being recorded and will ultimately be posted with closed captioning and all of that on the Trash Free Waters website in their library. So folks will be able to send it and view it later again. Okay, this segment is a little different. For the next 15 or 20 minutes, I'd like to just have a conversation with all of you around a couple of things. First question, jump in, talk to each other. I don't need to be a part of it. What do you think about the enabling environment for expansion of these reuse systems? What are the changes that are needed to really make dramatic increases in the use of reuse and refill systems in the US? And those might be policy changes, they might be consumer behavior changes, they may be infrastructure. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, in my experience, I think it really comes down to supply chain. Right now, we just don't have the infrastructure and the supply chain set up for a circular reuse model. And so we need to put those in place. And that includes how are you going to recover the reusable materials? That's really important. That can be done in numerous number of ways, but in our experience, the technology is part of the missing infrastructure. You can incentivize the recovery of materials. I think I want to write a whole paper on it. I feel like that is one of the biggest themes of if you can't recover it, people don't return it. What is the point? You just buy it over and over, and that defeats the purpose. Also, making return accessible and convenient for people and businesses is really important. And then finally, creating routes and facilities for pickup, transport, wash, and redelivery. So for me, it's a logistical thing that is, not insurmountable. We can do this.
I'll jump in. So I'll jump in, Crystal. I agree with all that. And I would say that we've been talking, I work a lot with local government, and we've been talking about how, for example, in the Bay Area where I live, how can we create an environment where all the brands and all the cafes, for example, could participate in a reusable cup scheme. Rather than, Starbucks putting out theirs and you can only return to Starbucks, and, another chain puts out theirs. And so we've been talking about how to create sort of regional community-wide program where everyone can play. And we're also working on creating that model with a community cup program. So I think it's important to crack that nut of having a reverse logistics program or the back end logistics program that isn't brand specific. So that's one. And then the other is I think that we need support from all constituencies. We need business support, government support, and consumer support. So we need consumers actually voicing to the businesses that they frequent and support, their dismay with the single-use model. We need government getting, and we see lots of examples of this, government both funding the acceleration of these technologies through grants and through grants and funding pilots directly, and also providing technical assistance to the local business community to help them understand how to put these practices into play. And then finally, business support, and just I love seeing the big brands jumping on board with the Loop store, because that's so impactful and influential.
Hanneke, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, just to echo a lot of what was just said, and I think all of those are really important parts. Like we mentioned earlier, there is no silver bullet within the world of sustainability, and there's no one way to go about this. And I think we have to be able to work with industry and with government and consumers, and be able to enable larger reuse platforms in multiple different avenues. So there are some really great options that both Crystal and Miriam went through as well, being the refill, like consumer-driven refill models, the ones where it's really a citywide program with standardized cups and having that type of a program as well. And then absolutely like the branded version as well. That's ultimately how across all of this we're going to get to scale. And with scale is when you get the efficiencies in play. And that's ultimately where those supply chain problems will come into play as well, because you can start to move enough around within that space.
Yeah, I'd like to add one thought onto that. I mean, the big brands do need their own programming. I mean, when I walk into my grocery store, it's filled with products from big brands. So we do need systems from big brands, but we also need systems for our community, local businesses who aren't playing in that space. So I think there's room for innovation, in all levels of the types of business sectors and markets.
Crystal, anything to add?
No, thank you.
Okay, let's move to our second topic, our second theme. Under Green to Go's model for takeout containers, there's one standardized container, if I understand things correctly. It's used by all participating restaurants, right? This is the same model, I think, that's being used in Oregon's bottle reuse system. What are the benefits and drawbacks to using standardized packaging across the industry? Is there a need, desire, or even the infrastructure to scale up to a national level?
Definitely, my favorite topic. There are some packaging issues that we're seeing globally right now, and for me, I believe it's a design issue. We have expanded our container line to reusable pizza boxes, reusable sauce cups, bowls, and coffee cups. But unfortunately, none of the reusable containers that we currently buy on the market meet the design and functional criteria for a citywide reuse system. Obviously, most reusable containers right now, they are designed like Tupperware. You pack your kids' lunch in, you store an onion in the fridge. They're not designed for hundreds of uses all around town. So Green to Go is developing our own product line of containers that meets the very stringent design criteria for citywide reuse programs. And that's not just the shapes and sizes customers need, but more importantly, maximum ability and longevity, repeated water in a commercial facility, maximum material health. That's very important as well. We don't want to be eating toxins, and maximum recyclability at the end of their life. So the way that the circular economy effectively designs out waste and makes the biggest environmental impact is when we design from the get-go things which are durable, and then we get them into a reuse system in which you maximize the useful life in the form in which they were originally created. So I see this as a design issue, and I think it will be a wonderful thing when we get to standardized packaging, where the same amazing containers can get back to everyone and be used by all, and there's no confusion. And that's how we can scale it to many other cities, is if the recycling infrastructure, for example, or something like it, picked up reusables, prepared it for collected, and prepared it for reuse, and became not just a recycling facility where you munch up materials and bale them and sell them to foreign buyers, but instead you're washing, sanitizing, and ultimately becomes like a redistribution facility instead of a munching up and baling facility. That's how we can get the scale we need across the country.
Okay, so Loop's model is a little different in the sense that we're customizing packaging for each product rather than standardizing packaging across multiple products. Yours is different. Why is it better? Talk to us.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of similarities with that, but we're approaching it from slightly different ways. So I would say standardization is key, but for us, it's standardizing the process of cleaning and what those requirements are for durability and cleanability rather than the package itself. There is a fit for this for both of these programs, for all of these programs, and for consumer refill as well. And I'm fascinated by what Crystal's doing as well. So just to put that out there. But in what we're doing basically right now is by having this opportunity to build it and design into durability and cleanability at its, at the beginning of the shift to the reusable kind of push, I would say, is something that the recycling industry, for instance, never had the capability of doing. Packaging was created with no kind of concept as to how it would be, end of life would be managed within that space, which is why now the majority of packaging cannot be recycled by municipal recycling because there's just too many different varieties within that space and there's no economics that work within there. So designing into the durable packaging, 100% we're aligned within that space. You have to design it from the get-go to be used 100 times or more. And then ultimately at its end of life, because everything does have an end of life, it's a matter of if it's 10 uses, 50 or 100 or 1,000, to be able to recycle it back into itself and just become itself again. And that's how you really bring about this like full circularity within that space. I would say that the Loop model acts a little bit more, mimics a bit more the existing supply chain, especially across like the big brands. Each brand right now, there is some standardization across obviously cereal boxes, have a similar kind of format in that space. Coffee cups have a similar format, but it's always specific and customized according to what that brand needs because of the different products that are within it too. They require different types of functionality in that packaging. So what we're doing is we really rethink packaging and the entire purpose of what packaging is. It's not just there to get one product to you. It can increase the experience for the consumer and how it actually affects the product inside of it as well. Whether it makes it, a longer shelf life, it keeps like Clorox wipes, it keeps them wetter for longer. Lets your ice cream melt the right way down rather than from the sides. So there's really a lot of exciting ways to go within that, but the key is you have to design it to be durable and to be cleaned and used again and again.
I love this format because I love watching the body language of everybody here. It always excites me. Miriam, you've got a different view on this. You're true to your name, Upstream Solutions. You've been looking at life cycle assessments for all of this reusable packaging. Tell us a little bit about that and how that fits.
Yeah, and we're also trying to figure out how we define reusable in policy language. On the life cycle, so the life cycle, looking at life cycle helps us think about what are the number of uses you have to have of a product, of a container or a package in order to get benefit, in order to get the environmental benefit. So the number, so how many times do you have to reuse it for it to account for, reusables are very heavy, they require potentially a lot more resources to manufacture, and so you have to reuse them a number of times before you overcome those upfront impacts of one package. But the environmental benefits accrue with different packages compared to the disposable, a different number of times. It could be for a refillable, it could be for a glass bottle, like a milk bottle. only 2, right? Because if you use a milk bottle once and recycle it, you're going to have pretty much twice as much benefit if you reuse it twice. But generally, the LCAs are telling us that for food packaging, between 10 and 100 times is where you start seeing the benefit. So it's very hard to create like standardized criteria. I think, as Annika was saying, you have to figure out which marketplace you're talking about and which kinds of products. And this is what we're grappling with. But we also, so we need to have criteria for the number of uses. That's part of the design criteria. And I think I want to echo a little bit what Crystal was saying. Like when we are writing legislation right now, we are saying the criteria that you use for what's a reusable product has to be that it's designed for X number of uses, but then it's actually used in the system X number of times. As Crystal was saying, you know, the actual usage is very important, not just what it's designed for. And then you want it to be less toxic and you want it to be recyclable at end of life. So the criteria and the number of uses are things that we are grappling with right now and how to write it into legislation.
Crystal, Annika, anything to add to this?
Well, one thing I really like, Miriam, that you do at Upstream is obviously model legislation that helps so many communities, helps Durham, helps us in our work. One of them you talked about before, and I don't know what to call it other than container type legislation, but it just seems so logical and simple. And I can't believe I never thought of it before when you told me that there's legislation that cities can enact to make sure that any packaging used in food service, let's say, has to be something that is valuable to the local recycling facility such that it will be reliably recycled, and is packaging that the local compost facility actually take and it's safe for them to take. And that seems like a really relevant packaging element that until we get there to full reuse, let's also, you know, regulate the not good stuff going to the not good places,
Right.
and encourage the right things to be going to the right places. And that can be done through policy.
Right. I want to expand on that idea. So, you know, while we are promoting reuse in our policies, everyone wants to know, okay, so we're promoting this, but we still have single use. We're not getting rid of it. So what do we say about those products? How should they be designed? And you can't, I think it's very hard to do this at a state or a federal level because every city and every county in America has a completely different, have completely different options for what to do with single-use products at end of life. Some have composting facilities, others don't. And so in one place, something can be recycled, and another place it can't. So I think it has, so the legislation models that we write say it has to be either recyclable or compostable in the local waste management system. And we are agnostic. Some communities just want everything to be compostable. Some want everything to be compostable or recyclable. I will just say that with foodware, almost none of it is recyclable everywhere. So that's why a lot of communities in the Bay Area that have compost systems are saying it all has to be compostable. But one last point, a lot of foodware doesn't compost well in commercial compost facilities, particularly bio-based or plant-based plastics. But there are also lots of other foodware items that either add the chemicals you talked about, the fluorinated chemicals, PFAS, or other chemicals, or just don't degrade that quickly. And let's be clear, food packaging is super processed. It doesn't add any nutrients to our compost. So it dilutes the quality of the compost at the end. So there are no really great solutions for single-use foodware on the waste end side of things. That's why we need to drive the reuse refill as much as possible.
Let's move to our third theme, and I feel like I've gotten a nice transition by the talk of model legislation. What are the lessons learned for developing and implementing reuse systems at the community level? What have we already experienced, and how can we leverage that?
Well, I'd like to go back to the idea of pairing policy and innovation together. I just feel that is extremely important. You can legislate all you want, but if the alternative is not there and easy for people for uptake, then the progress will not be made. And meanwhile, innovation is great, but if supportive policy is not in place, it may not be sustainable or widely acceptable, or there wouldn't be the incentive for people to use it. So I would say, if I was advising a city on what to do, how to get started, I would say, talk to Miriam about model legislation, join the National Reuse Network. That's first of all. And then I would say, get together with us. We have made all the mistakes for you, and we have documented our best practices, and we have a set of management tools that is basically a blueprint of what you need to run the program. We've already created that. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. We can also design solutions with you, because that's what we spend all day thinking about and all night dreaming about, are solutions for how to make reuse possible in all kinds of industries. So we could, have a concept sprint with you, where we get together and you tell us what your special circumstances are in your town, what people want there, and then we can suggest, if we were doing it, this is where we would start. We have a recipe of 10 things to do to get started, ingredients that you really need to have in place, so people can see, is my city ready for this or not, or how to get ready. And then, we are also willing to get on the phone and talk through and help problem solve and point people to resources. So, we just want to proliferate reuse everywhere. And that's what I would advise to cities that want to get started.
One thing that we encountered early on, so enacting the Berkeley single-use foodware and litter reduction law in 2019 was our first major policy on how to promote reuse at and an indisposable community. And we originally we were applying the model of bag bans and fees to cups and containers, and saying, if we stop making these cups and containers free and we attach a cost to them, this will make reuse more attractive to customers, and also the businesses get to keep the money, so it's attractive to them also. But we could not, Berkeley could see the possibility of reusable cups as a way for people to avoid the charge. So the city council was open to that, but there was no reusable container option. People, couldn't bring reusable containers because a lot of personal containers, because a lot of businesses wouldn't accept them. Even though they're allowed under the state health code, businesses wouldn't accept them because they are worried about cross-contamination. So without programs like Green to Go available at the local level, policymakers couldn't see attaching a charge to the food containers. So this is an example of where, you really need to have these reuse systems in place for a community to be able to enact policies that accelerate them. This cross-pollination thing that Crystal was talking about is real. It's a real need. We really need government to be, so what Berkeley did instead was they decided that they would fund some pilot projects, some reusable cup and container programs, and they would try to provide the technical assistance and support so that that model of reusable food containers would accelerate. And they also said that they would revisit having a charge on those containers in 3 years once the business innovation happened.
Thanks, Mary. Annika, thoughts?
No, just echoing everything that was said before. It really comes again across multifacets within that space. Policy often represents what people are saying and asking for already. So you do have to have some interest from everybody in that space. And like Crystal was saying, you need to have the infrastructure that's ready for that to actually implement it as well. So being able to kind of work across all of those aspects is absolutely, yeah, number 2, key.
Cool. Okay, well, let's move to our third segment. We're running out of time, but we have 15 or 20 minutes to do questions and answers from among the, what is now about 200 people who are watching our webinar today. So first, to those who are watching, use the chat box in the right-hand, I believe, segment of your screen. Make sure that when you type your question, you type it to all attendees. At that point, Ivana and Casey will sort of group things for me to convey to our panelists. We'll do this for maybe 15 or 20 minutes. I believe the contact screen slide will also be up so that if we don't get to your questions, you can contact our panelists or the Trash Free Waters program directly, and we'll do our very best to get you answers as soon as we can. Okay, if you've already asked questions in the chat box, please know that Ivana and Casey have been tracking and cataloging. So you don't need to ask them again. Okay, first question. I think this one goes to Crystal. Vanessa Farragut asks, how do you get people to return the reusables and not keep them? We rolled this out, she says, in 2016, and by February 2020, they lost almost 80% of their inventory.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. This is, of course, as I was mentioning, one of the things I really love is thinking about how to incentivize recovery of materials. It all comes back to that. And just like your the challenges that you've experienced, we've got to have something in place to incentivize. So how can you do that? You know, there's carrots and there's sticks. We use a lot of carrots. We have an app which you know, goes a long way to allow the means to incentivize recovery. If people correctly check out in return, they're getting points. They can get rewards, they can get badges. We can also send reminders through the app. We can remind them where their closest return station is. There are lots of things that can be done, making return very convenient and accessible to people, making it fun. Also, I mean, this might sound a little cheesy, but in this time that we're living in, people feel overwhelmed. And I think they look at the headlines about environmental sustainability and they sit on their couch and cry. But a program like Green to Go can give them an instant, simple, concrete action that they can take today to be a part of the solution. So they're really like a part of something bigger than themselves. And that part goes back to messaging. If you say this reusable container makes a difference, and to make that difference, we need to keep it in circulation, so do your part. And if you really want to use a stick, if you think about it, just like a library system, you could, because some people are motivated that way, charge small fees, late fees until they do. So those are some ways to get a higher return rate. We have an independent study conducted on our checkout and return data, and we have a 97% return rate.
Okay, This one, I think more to Annika, but maybe to all of you. Teresa, Carey, and others have said that related to Loop and the other programs, because the consumer pays a premium for the durable, reusable packaging, there's a need to order a lot of stuff to make it economical. How does the in-store option address the premium that the consumer pays in terms of cost? And how do you convince them to make this an option for everyone?
Yeah, so what's been live in the United States right now is what we call loopstore.com. Really, this is a relatively low volume type of pilot website where you can order these great products out of a loop durable container. The next phase of this and where it's really going in 2021 is moving into in-store iterations. So Kroger is going live actually in the Portland area with 27 stores as of July this year. And Walgreens is actually going live this summer as well in the New York City area with about 100 locations. So you're going to see these in-store iterations where the pricing is really a conversation between the retailer and the brand itself. But the objective here is really to be around price parity within the space, to be able to see what reuse looks like on a larger scale as well. What I would say is the difference here, and similar to what Crystal was saying earlier, how we incentivize consumers to return the used packaging is a deposit system. It's something that's well known throughout. It's already pretty prevalent within the US in a couple of certain areas. Your propane tank that you take back to the hardware store to get refilled, you have a cheaper price for that, or a soda stream as an example. What we're trying to do is expand that across different industries. So within the Canadian example here too, all beer bottles are done on a professionally reused system where you pay a 15-cent deposit and you bring it back and you get your money back for in that space. It works well, and we've seen it work really well across the Loop side too, across the 4 markets that we've been live for the past 2 years within this space. So similar to what Crystal was saying, we have upwards of 90% return rate across all of these markets because consumers are excited to be able to return it as well. One, because you get the deposit back, but then also just to be part of a more sustainable future within that space.
Other perspectives?
I would just like to share a policy perspective that we've been noodling since when we first started working on this, which is, how do we create an environment where the single use is more expensive than the reusable? I think that's a way to get consumers to always bring back the reusable or choose the reusable. So that's one approach as well.
All right, we've had a lot of questions asking for who pays for picking up and washing the containers.
So we charge individual membership fees to consumers. So they pay $25 a year, and that gives us the money we need for the upfront cost of containers. And then we also have restaurant fees and corporate subscriber fees. And all of that goes toward, the operational costs of picking up, washing, and delivering.
Annika?
Yeah, so on the Loop side, we work with our brand partners on the cleaning and the servicing fees. How that's basically approached is instead of buying a new package, you pay for the cleaning and servicing of that used package. So it starts to kind of go over uses within that space.
We have an inventory of reuse businesses on our website in the food and beverage space, and we're just seeing so many different models for this. So there are models where the consumer is paying all the cost, where the cafe or the business is paying all the cost, and there are companies where the cost is shared. But the business is paying part of it, the consumer pays part of it. There are subscription models for consumers. There are, just individual, kind of pay as you go with the deposit. So all kinds of models.
I want to add something. We've been exploring, of course, for the last 4 years. We're very iterative, trying all different sorts of revenue models in different ways. Is an upfront subscription fee the right way to go? Is a deposit system the right way to go? Is a transactional fee per item that you buy the way to go? And we've been pilot testing all of these things. But one question that always comes up, and it actually comes up frequently in the Reuse System Alliance, those 35 companies, very much like Green to Go all over the world, are facing the same question, which is, who should bear the burden of cost of a reuse system? Is it the consumers who want to use it? Is it the restaurants who could potentially save money from using disposables? Or in my mind, I think corporations have some responsibility to take, and I believe there should be some subsidization by corporations to offset some of the impacts they're having on the environment to go into a reuse system. But ultimately, my dream and hope and goal is for this is really very well suited to be run by the government. And there's a really good reason for that, multiple reasons. And one is that if you look at city government, county government, state government strategic plans, you will see that reducing waste is in there. It's important. They have to pay money to manage waste. They have to pay money to manage stormwater. So a reuse system is something that directly relates to their strategic plan. And this is very well suited for the future to be completely funded by the government.
Yeah, and we are seeing models like that, especially in Germany. They started with it in Hanover, Germany, and Freiburg, Germany. Sorry for the mispronunciation, where it is a local solid waste department or waste department that decided to jump into the game and provide a reusable cup program. And we're seeing, we're working in the community of Mill Valley to launch in California, to launch a community cup program. And the city is also jumping in as a funding partner because they recognize that they're going to save money on the waste costs. And also haulers are jumping in because, and I'm actually not sure why. Crystal, maybe you can tell me why, because they do make money on waste, but they're also interested in reducing it. And so we're seeing haulers jump into the funding of reuse models.
Okay, I got two more questions. And the first is a little tangential, but it'd be interesting to get your responses. Someone writes that they'd love to hear someone talk about the institutions such as the medical field and the abundance of plastic waste in implementing reuse programs in our school systems. So medical waste, school systems, reuse, where do they all come together?
Well, school systems are interesting because, at least I remember from my school days, we used reusable lunch trays. Many things were reusable, whether you're a small school or a large school, and that was the way it was across the district. What we see frequently now are disposable single-use lunch trays. In our case here in Durham, up until very recently, all of those were disposable styrofoam lunch trays, which were used every day, every lunch hour, by every child in every school across the whole district. And that is an incredible amount of waste. And I would really like to see the school districts returning to reusable lunch trays. There's a school district nearby who's consulted with us, and they would like us to help them pilot a zero waste school. What would that look like? And of course, lunchroom waste is a very large part of their waste stream. And Green to Go is a perfect example. Either they could, a school district could wash centrally themselves. Perhaps each school could wash if they have the infrastructure. And if infrastructure does not exist, we are essentially a wash service and could pick up, wash, and deliver. I always tell people it's not rocket science. It's really about washing dishes. And if that's what's missing, we can fill that gap.
I will just add that there are school districts that are, and schools that are piloting this kind of work. One program that I helped to launch called Rethink Disposable, a program of Clean Water Fund, has worked with 2 school districts, Palo Alto Unified School District, and I'm sorry, Rethink Disposable, I'm forgetting the other one. And these schools have transitioned to reusables in their dining programs and both have saved money. And it's what we see case after case after case, not just in schools, but everywhere, that reuse saves money, even after you add some dishwashing capacity and labor. So I think there's a lot of hope for schools. I don't know about, what was the other sector you were talking about?
The medical waste area.
God, much harder nut to crack, right?
Yeah.
Because of all the concerns about hygiene and sanitation.
That's right.
But you should definitely have a whole webinar on that with people who know something. I know nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, interestingly, when it's about hospitals and medical setting, oftentimes, you know, safety and sterilization can be at odds with sustainability, and that's something we found. The Duke University medical system is giant here in Durham, and we did approach them about talking about reusable cups in the hospital rooms, and even that was a tricky nut to crack. They said the best place to start is in the hospital cafeterias. So we'll slowly work our way into the hospitals.
I will say one thing, you know, right now we're going back to the milk bottle, to the milkman model, right? And now all of a sudden that makes sense. You know, I'm old enough to remember when things in the hospital setting were metal and reusable and sterilized. And I think it's just I think a lot of it is mindset and working with regulators, working with the health departments on standards to be able to make reusables play again and address the safety and the health concerns.
I think you hit the nail there, Miriam. If you think of just dentists, a real life example of where it's still very prevalent in reuse, you don't think about when you go to the dentist how many times that, you know, utensil has been used in other, like the thousands of months before you, because it's sterilized and cleaned according to, you know, what it needs to be safe for use. And that is, it's about how to think about it and how to go about it, definitely.
Yep. All right, I'm going to ask for a bullet point answer to the very last question, then I'm going to close this out. How do you stay motivated to create change? Bullet point answer. Give me one. How do you stay motivated to stay in this game and push the edge of the envelope?
I think for me, it's my kids. That's a pretty cheesy one, but I look at them and I want them to drink clean water and I want them to be healthy and breathe clean air and live for a long time with a high quality of life.
For me, it's been about climate change and the planet from the very beginning. The first time I saw the plastic debris that Charlie Moore brought back from his first gyre journey and showed me all the plastic floating on the surface of the Pacific Ocean, I was like, oh my God, this is totally a climate issue right here, because you think about all the resources that go into this plastic debris, even paper products. It's like, if we are going, it's about our future. If we're going to be able to survive as a species, we have to stop extracting all these resources and having this make, take, dispose model. So that's how I stay motivated. It's a desire for future generations to live.
Annika.
Exact same. It's you know, I've been on the sustainable journey for a long time now as well, personally as well, and it's just from taking a hike in a nature park and seeing a granola wrapper every couple of feet that you walk. It is devastating, and I feel the shift coming in the industry, and it's so exciting. So that's how I stay motivated, by working with, you know, people like Miriam and Crystal, and it's happening, and it's coming soon, and it's exciting.
Awesome. And I hope you've motivated everyone out there today. There were so many great questions that came up through the chat box. 90 minutes goes so fast, and I wish we had the time to answer them all. I encourage you, if you did not get your question answered, please contact any one of the 5 people there. reach back to us at KNW. We'll do our very best to get your questions answered. Trash-free waters exists sort of at the nexus of sustainable materials management and solid waste management and water quality. For today, the less waste that's in the environment, the cleaner our waters. It's pretty simple math. Over my time with Trash-Free Waters, I think the program's introduced literally dozens of projects across America. We've hosted several webinars and offered national policy and research. The hope is that this webinar and our other efforts have helped catalyze some energy and move the needle on keeping our watersheds and our large aquatic ecosystems trash-free. We hope that's true today. On behalf of all three of our distinguished guests and the entire Kearns and West team, thank you for sharing this time with us. We hope that you found it all helpful, informative, and even a little entertaining. Stay tuned for our next webinar, likely in June. Follow the monthly flow of trash-free waters, or the quarterly flow of trash-free waters, I apologize, the monthly rapids, and even the Trash-Free Waters website for more information on webinars and other efforts by the program. Before you sign off, we have a few polling questions. Please take a moment to answer them, as the responses help us to evolve the series to better address the questions that you face out there. All right, everybody, go forth, do great things, and thank you for everything that y'all do to keep our waters trash-free. It's been fun. We'll see you soon.